So now we're going to get into state sets and 3D Studio Max, and particularly how to work between 3D Studio Max and After Effects. So the video that I showed, we did a lot of working between the two softwares, particularly for the overlays that we created. So whenever there was a highlight that was revealed in the map, there would be an overlay that would come up and indicate what that highlight was. Now we created panels or helper objects in 3D Studio Max, animated them, and then exported them over to After Effects along with the camera. And that way we could composite our own graphics and fonts and really design them the way we like, independently of other factors such as like lighting or fog, or whatever effects that you want to keep them separate and easy to edit. So let's get into it now, and I'll show you how we do all of that. So before we can start working between 3D Studio Max and After Effects, there is a little bit of a setup that has to happen. And it's really just a matter of copying over a couple files. So as you can see, I've got two windows open here. The first one, you want to open up your Autodesk program files. So here is the address right here: Program Files, Autodesk, 3D Studio Max, External Plugins, CS5, Windows. And what you'll find here are three files. And the first one we want to copy over is this plugin file. So open up another window and you'll have to find this directory: Program Files, Adobe, After Effects, Support Files, and Plugins. And you'll want to find a folder called AEPG. Now if it's not there, you can create it yourself and then just copy this file to there. Now these other two files here, these two DLL files, will basically get copied to support files. So just go up a couple folders and you'll be able to just drop them in here. So here we are in 3D Studio Max, and we've got a scene that I set up that's representational of the video that we created. So you'll see that there's a gray ground here and a blue box representing, say, a building. I've got a camera in here that's orbiting around the blue box, and then there's a green pop-up that's coming up that's animating upwards, which will be our overlay helper. So the first thing that we want to do is set up an actual render of the animation so that we can have a base to build these overlays. So first thing, let's open up our render state sets. Now here you'll see state sets, and there's already a state set that's already been set up by default. So we'll use that as our base state. In order to activate it, we'll have to select the little circle there, and it'll turn red when we know it's actually recording our actions for that state. Now I'm going to go into the viewport here, and what I want to do is I'm going to hide this overlay panel because I don't want it to be in my base render. I want that to be an overlay in After Effects, so I don't want it to show up in my render. However, I do want it to affect the scene, so I do want it to cast a shadow, or in this case display some ambient occlusion as it passes through the ground. So right here I actually want it to appear as though it's in the scene, but we don't actually want to see the object. So we want it to affect the scene, but we don't want it to actually be in the scene. So the first thing we'll do, we are recording, so I will select the object, right click on it, go to Object Properties, and this value right here, visible to camera, we're going to deselect it. Everything else can stay the same. And then we'll go OK. So let's create a render with the with this helper halfway through the floor, because then I'll be able to see if there's actually some kind of effect happening in the scene. So here's the render, and you can see that there's actually a little bit of gray in the ground, and that's an ambient occlusion that's being affected by the green panel, even though the green panel isn't being rendered. So perfect, we've got that set up. Let's close this up. Now I'm going to set up my my render setup for this actual state set. So let's select record again. And we'll go over here and open up the render setup, which is this button on the toolbar. And the window will pop up. So let's just, what we're going to do is customize a couple things for this state set's render. And since I have the record button on, it's going to remember every one of the settings that I put inside of this render setup. So what I have here is I've selected the active time segment to be frame 0 to 100 so that I can get a render of the animated sequence. The output size I'm just going to leave at 640 by 480. That's fine for the sake of a demonstration. For now I'm going to leave the render output because we can set that up in the actual state set render output, and it will override these render setups. And finally, this window down here, this part down here, just make sure that your camera is actually selected so that when it does render the state set, it will read that camera. Now back over here in the state sets, down in the render outputs, I'm just going to hit browse, and I'm just going to do a little search here for the actual folder that I want to send all of my renders to. So I'm in the project now. I'm going to look for the render output and just hit OK. Now what it's going to do is anything that I render here, this link is actually going to, if I hit set path, it's going to override the output settings. So if I hit set path right now, and we look over here in the render setup, you'll see that it's actually copied it over and it's created a setting in the state set to have that render output. Now once we've set the render path in the render setup over here, we can actually go in and change the type of file that you'd like your animated sequence to be rendered out as. So if I go into file here, we can go down and select, perhaps I want to make an AVI. So I'm just going to save that out, such as so. Go OK. And then what it's done is it's changed the file format to AVI. One last thing, I'm going to rename this actual state set. So to rename the state set, let's just click twice, kind of slowly. If you do it too quickly, it won't let you edit it. I'm just going to call this the box render so that we know that that's the actual render for the compositing. Now that we've got the state set all set up the way we'd like, it's time to render. So the way to do that is to come up to states, and all you have to do is hit render all states. So the render is now complete. I'm just going to shut this window down and show you that it's actually rendered out into the path that I've asked it to go to, and it's named it exactly what I wanted it to be named. And here is our base video for compositing. I'll just play that. And you can see there's the little bit of final gathering for the hidden object, the helper that we're going to be exporting next. So now that we've got the base animation sequence rendered out, we're going to move on to selecting our camera and our helper object and getting it set up in the state sets so we can export it to After Effects. So the first thing we'll want to do is actually select the camera that we want, also, as well as the dummy object, because we now have a camera rig that we're dependent on. So select those two objects, and then also select the helper object, that little guy that's popping up that we want to actually build an overlay over. So we've got those three things selected. And what I'm going to do is go over to my state set window, and simply where it says objects, this is a special state set that's been set up for actual 3D objects. So go over here and actually select the record button, and you'll notice that everything else disappears except for what we had selected. So now that we've added our objects to the state set's object state, let's go over here and just deselect the record button. And the next thing we're going to want to do is create a link between Max and After Effects. So the way to do that is we'll go down here to the compositor link, and let's select Create Link. So we're going to be creating a file, a state output file, and this is our link between the two applications. So I'm just going to call it Box Render Link. So now we've created the compositor link down here, and you can see that the name of the file is showing up in that little window. Let's move into After Effects and make that link here so that it shows up in both applications. So we'll go up to the File and go to Open Compositor Link, and you'll see Autodesk in parentheses. You'll know that that's the plugin. And you'll see a very similar window pop up in After Effects. So we'll go Update to Link, find the folder that you saved the state output file, and I'll select that. It'll ask me to save. And basically it's also created a link, and it's brought everything over into After Effects that I've had in state sets in Autodesk, which is really cool. Now you'll see in my project window of After Effects that here's the composition, the Autodesk link composition. So if I double click on that, here's everything from Max in After Effects. If I scroll through this, we'll see there's our render, but we don't see anything else yet. And the reason for that is when it's brought it into this comp, it's actually put the the animation, the AVI, at the top. So let's just bring that down so we can actually see where everything is. There's our helper object, the purple box right there. Now if I right click on the comp and I just go to comp settings, you'll see that it's actually brought everything over exactly according to my render. So the composition size is 640 by 480, the same as what we set up in the render state sets. And you'll see that the duration is actually exactly what I set up in the render setup as well. So that's really great. Now we can easily go in and start manipulating some of these objects. I'm just going to select this plane, and you can see all of the animation that's been baked into that object. And because it is a 3D object in 3D space, basically what we're going to do is link up in After Effects a graphic that will follow that exact animation. And we can easily customize it and change it, and it will always maintain that animation. So the way we did it for the video is we created a separate composition for those graphics. So I'm just going to go up to here to my composition, new composition. Let's just make it small as well. 640 by 400, that'll be fine. And I'm just going to add some graphics. So let's just go change this to white. And let's type, let's change the font size. There we go. I'm I'm just going to grab my align tool here, just align the text. And I'm going to create a background layer. So I went to Layer, New, Solid. That's fine. And you can just click and drag and bring that layer behind. There, now we have a nice graphic. I don't know about nice, but we've got a graphic we can attach to that overlay. So I'm also going to rename the comp. So if you go to Composition Settings, we'll just call this Overlay. So once we have this graphic set up, we'll go back to the main comp with all the Autodesk assets in there. And I'm just going to click and drag this overlay into the comp. So the first thing I want to do is actually make it a three-dimensional object so that I can link it to the plane. So I'll just click here. And as you can see, it's kind of here somewhere, but it's sort of disappeared. So what I'll do is change my views. So right here where it says one view, I'm going to change it to 2 views. And over here to my left is a top view. So I'll just zoom out a bit, see if we can find where everything is. As you can see, there's a gizmo in here that works just like Max, so it should be somewhat familiar to move around in this application as well. Now, the plane is located here, the overlay is here, the camera from the top view is right here. Basically what I'm going to do is line up this overlay object to have the same position and rotation as the helper object. So actually, first of all, I'm just going to scale it down a little. It's a little bit large, so I'm just scaling it down so that I can zoom in there. So here's our overlay object, and here's the plane that we're going to be linking it to. And I have to make sure that I'm on the very first frame of the comp as well so that we can line up the animation properly. So select the plane object, hit P, and that's the shortcut for position, and do the same for your overlay object. Now all I'm going to do is copy and paste the values from plane over to overlay. So Control C, Control V. Do it for each of the 3 values. So now you can see that the position is actually lined up exactly with the plane. I'll do the same thing for the rotation. So here's the X value, the Y value, and the Z value. Now there's still one problem, and that's when we animate. There's a couple problems. The alignment is a bit off, and it's also just sitting there. It's not actually animating that graphic. So I'm just going to go here, go back to my rotation, and I'm just going to rotate in the Z axis to 180. And I'm also going to adjust the scale again. It's pretty big. So you can see this overlay is just sitting in 3-dimensional space. It's not animating anywhere. What we want it to do is actually follow the path of the animation of this guy, of our actual helper object. So the way to do that is we'll come back to the very first frame, make sure that you're at frame 0, select your overlay, and then there's a little thing called a pickwick here, and this is this little spiral icon. Click on that and click and drag to plane. And what that does is it's actually parented the overlay to the plane. So now it will follow the plane wherever it goes. There you go. So now the helper object is guiding the graphic. Now that we have this helper object as a guide, we can actually just turn it right off. So often what I would do is just turn it off right here where the eyeball is, and now it won't be rendered in the scene at all. And another thing that we can do is start to play with the visibility. So in After Effects, if you select the key T, it's the shortcut for opacity. I'm just going to go to say about here is where I'd want the visibility to start. Remember that we have this contact shadow from the ambient occlusion that we would like to have visible for the final render. So let's say we want the graphic to be 100% opacity at this point. I'm going to click on here. It creates a keyframe. Let's go back to say about there, and I'm going to change my opacity to 0. Now when I hit play, you can see it's going to be completely invisible until it pops up. If you want to go back and change some animation in your Max file and you want to update your After Effects file, let's take a look at how we can do that. So right now we've got the animation of that overlay coming up right about here, but what if we want it to come a little bit sooner, or we want to change it up just a little bit? Well, we can easily go back to Max and we can adjust that animation and then re-export it. So I'm just going to, what I have is this, we've got this, the overlay selected, and I'm just going to move this keyframe back here just to adjust the animation so it starts. Let's have it even sooner so we actually see the animation happen. All I have to do is very simple, just select this update to link, click on that, and what it'll do, you don't really see anything happening, but when we come back to After Effects, I'll go to this window again and say update from link, and what we'll see is that this overlay, instead of the animation happening, I think it was coming up right around there, now it's actually starting way back here. I'll just move these keyframes back so you can actually see that. And it's just as simple as that. Now we've got an adjusted animation. Now we can also go the other way. We can actually adjust animation in After Effects and it will bring it over to Max. So I'll just demonstrate that here. Now you can see that all the keys here, it's basically keyframed every single frame, and that's because it's baked the animation from Max. So I'm just going to go in and delete some of these frames, maybe from here to there. I think I'll just go, oops, I'm in rotation. I'm going to change it to position. So from here to here, let's just delete some of these frames. Oops. Like so. You can see the animation is still there, it's just that we've removed all these extraneous frames that are really not necessary, and I'm just going to delete a few more. I think what I'll do is I'll create a little bit of a wiggle here so you can actually see how this works. So let's go here, we'll move the frame this way and then move it this way so you can see. If I play back, it's just doing a funny little wiggle. And all I have to do to bring that back to Max would be same thing. Update to link. And let's minimize this. And in Max with my state set, and I can go update from link. Now you can see it's done the same thing this way, and it's actually baked in a bunch of keys. But it's brought over that exact animation. I'm just going to go like this so we can see. Oops. And there's our little wiggle, and it's been brought back into Max. So you can see that there is all these baked frames, but you can always go in and delete them, and you can readjust things and then bring them back and forth. So I hope that this has helped you form some sort of a foundation for state sets. It's actually an amazing tool, and it offers a lot of flexibility between the two applications. So you can do many things like change camera moves, overlays, animating objects between the two. Have a lot of fun with it and try out some of the many features that it offers, and make some cool stuff.